Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. Alrighty, it's a new day and that means a new game. Thank you all for joining me once more, so let's get into this. This week, Sean is playing his Ur-Dragon deck again and keeps a hand with Mirror Entity, Ranger's Path, Sol Ring, Plains, Taiga, Temple Garden, and Watery Grave. Matt is taking his Simic Azuri deck out for a spin and keeps a hand with Counterspell, Swiftfoot Boots, 3 Forests, Cold Eye Selkie, and Exploration. Pat, not to be confused with the other Pat from Montreal and the other Pat in New Jersey, is new to the channel and is taking out his Shiri Shizo's Caretaker deck and keeps an opener with Disciple of Griselbrand, Blade of the Blood Chief, 2 Swamps, Perilous Mirror, Bone Shredder, and Ruinous Path. And lastly, Trevor is on the Vial Smasher train and keeps a hand with Cinderglade, Smoldering Marsh, Dragonskull Summit, Sakura Tribe Elder, Primal Amulet, Read the Bones, and Farseek. New Pat wins the die roll and starts us off. Pat plays a Swamp and casts Blade of the Blood Chief. Trevor plays a Cinderglade, which comes into play tapped and passes to Matt. Matt plays a Forest and casts Exploration before dropping a second Forest. Sean plays a Plains and casts Sol Ring before passing. Pat plays a Swamp and casts Perilous Mirror before passing. Trevor plays Dragonskull Summit and pays 2 to cast Farseek, finding an overgrown tomb. Matt plays a Forest and an Island in quick succession. Matt then casts a casual turn 2 Azuri and passes to Sean. Sean plays Taiga and taps out to cast Ranger's Path, finding 2 Forest cards and putting them onto the field. Pat is sadly stalled on lands, but he does cast Disciple of Griselbrand before passing to Trevor. Trevor plays a tapped Smoldering Marsh before bringing out the Vivacious Vial Smasher. Matt plays a Forest and an Island once more before casting Swiftfoot Boots and equipping them onto his commander. Matt then casts Cold-Eyed Selkie, gaining an experience counter, and moves through his combat step to pass to Sean. Matt does take the opportunity to put the counter from Azuri on his Cold-Eyed Selkie. Sean, being the disturbed individual that he is, casts Curse of Disturbance on himself as we've seen before. He follows up with a Farseek before passing to Pat. Pat seems to be cursed and cannot seem to draw land. Despite his creatures costing very little, he still can't do very much. Concerned with Matt's Selkie, Pat sacrifices Perilous Mirror to the Disciple, gaining 1 life and dealing 2 damage to the merfolk. As Pat is doing this, Sean unfortunately realizes he forgot to play a land last turn, despite having a few in his hand. Pat then casts Innocent Blood, and the board gets cleared. Trevor's turn is quite quick, and he plays a Savage Lands before tapping out to cast Primal Amulet. Matt has no lands for turn, but sitting at 6 already has him in a decent spot. He decides not to recast Azuri for fear of him being removed easily, so he goes for plan B, Champion of the Lambhold. With nothing else, he passes to Sean. Sean plays Watery Grave untapped, taking 2 damage. He then casts Xenograph, naming dragons. Sean follows up with a Mirror Entity who doesn't actually need the Xenograph to be a dragon, but what he doesn't realize is he's created a double dragon. With nothing else, Sean passes. Pat, I'm sad to say, still has no lands, and we wonder if they're not hidden on the bottom of his library. He casts Thoughtpicker Witch, which is really fun and underplayed sacrifice outlet in black, but Matt doesn't want Pat to slowly pick away at libraries and counters it with a counterspell. Trevor casts Read the Bones during his first main phase, taking 2 and keeping 1 on top and putting 1 on the bottom from the cards he scryed. Trevor then draws 2 and puts a counter on his Primal Amulet. Trevor then casts Sakura Tribe Elder and passes to Matt. Matt draws for turn, and Trevor decides to sacrifice the Elder during this point to save himself some time, grabbing his library and going to find a basic. Matt also wants to find some basics, and he casts Kadama's Reach during his first main phase, finding 2 and putting 1 onto the field and 1 into his hand. He then plays the one he put into his hand as his land for turn. Matt then pays 1 to equip his champion with some nice boots, and passes turn. Sean draws for turn and casts the Locust Dragon, God, during his first main phase. He follows up with a Sacred Foundry coming into play untapped and takes 2 damage. Moving to combat, Sean draws First Blood, that isn't self-inflicted mind you, by attacking Trevor with the Mirror Entity. Pat still can't seem to find that elusive land and has to settle for a Reassembling Skeleton's impression of a swamp, which isn't that great. Sullenly, he passes. At the end of turn, Trevor delves away his graveyard to cast Murderous Cut, killing Sean's Mirror Entity and gaining another counter on the amulet. Trevor casts Siphon Mind in his first main phase, forcing his opponents to discard a card and putting a counter on his amulet. Trevor only gets to draw 2 as Matt has no hand. With nothing else, Trevor passes to Matt. Matt is in top deck mode at this point, which isn't always where you want to be when you've got not much of a board state. Matt then recasts Azuri and moves the boots onto his commander. Moving to combat, Matt puts the soul counter on his champion and passes to Sean. Sean draws for turn, and the Locust Dragon makes an Insect Dragon token. Sean then taps out, getting a 2 sweet from Matt for good luck, and brings out the Dragon. Sean then moves to combat and swings the Insect at Matt for 1 and the Locust God at Pat. Matt's feeling betrayed after the 2 sweet, and Sean draws 2 cards, getting 2 more Insect Dragon tokens, and puts Thunderbreak Regent from his hand onto the field. Moving to his second main phase, Sean plays an island and passes turn. Pat finally gets there by drawing and playing Nykthos and equips the skeleton with the Blade of the Bloodchief before passing turn. Trevor casts a Ranger's Path for his turn, putting the final counter on the Primal Amulet, flipping it to reveal Primal Wellspring. Trevor grabs Sheltered Thicket and Stomping Grounds. Trevor then quickly counts up the creatures on his board and is able to cast Blasphemous Act for only 1 red to wipe the board. Trevor then passes turn, and Sean returns the Locust God to his hand at the end of Trevor's turn. Matt casts Reclamation Sage during his first main phase, and with the amulet gone, takes out the next biggest threat, Sean's Xenograft. With nothing else, Matt passes. Sean taps 6 to recast the Locust God during his first main phase, and paying 4, draws a card and discards a card with the God's ability. This gets him an Inset token, and Sean bins a Hollowed Fountain before playing a Scalding Tarn. Sean then cracks the Tarn to find a tapped Steam Vents, and at the end of turn, Pat uses the Reassembling's ability to put it back onto the field. Pat draws and plays a Swamp, finally getting back into the game, but sadly the arts don't match. Pat considers casting more creatures from his hand, but in the end decides to simply equip the skeleton with the Blade of the Bloodchief once more. For Trevor's turn, during his first main phase, he recasts Vial Smasher and passes to Matt. Matt plays Novagen Heart of Progress as his land for turn, but with nothing he wants to cast in his hand and no good avenues of attack, he passes to Sean. Sean draws for turn and gets another Insect token. Sean then follows up by casting Gilded Lotus during his first main phase and activates the Locust God's ability once more, drawing and getting an Insect token before discarding a mountain. Sean activates the God once more, repeating the cycle of drawing, getting a token, and discarding Aura Mutation before moving to combat. Sean decides to swing the Locust God at Trevor for 4 damage and passes to Pat. Pat doesn't hit a land unfortunately and decides to simply pass to Trevor. Pat does promise that he's got some action in hand once he hits 5 lands, which probably isn't the best thing to tell the table when you're stuck on 4. For Trevor's turn, during his first main phase, he casts Painful Truths, paying 3 colors of mana to draw 3 and lose 3. Vial Smasher triggers from this, and she randomly assigns 3 damage to Sean. Trevor then plays a Swamp, and Trevor casts Rampant Growth using the Primal Wellspring to copy it before he finds 2 basics. He discards down to 7 while he's searching, and pitches Cruel Entertainment. Matt draws a card for turn and plays a Simic Guildgate. He then casts Herald of the Secret Streams, a new card from Ixalan, which is pure gas in an Azuri deck, and activates the Novagen to give it a counter before putting the boots on the Merfolk. Moving to combat, he swings the Herald at Sean, which triggers the curse, giving both Matt and Sean a 2/2 zombie. Sean draws for turn, getting another Insect token, and casts Aven Windguide. He then plays Cryptolith Rites, which seems like a good card with hasty insects. Moving to combat, Sean swings all of his tokens, which now have Flying and Vigilance, at Matt for 7. With nothing else, Sean passes turn. Pat draws that 5th land he'd been threatening and plays it. Pat then casts Shiri and politely asks the table not to kill his commander, which isn't a great sign, and passes turn. Trevor casts Wretched Confluence at the end of Pat's turn, and he chooses the -2/-2 mode 3 times and kills 3 of Sean's insects, which in turn triggers Pat's Blade of the Bloodchief, giving his Reassembling Skeleton 3+1+1 counters. This also triggers Vial Smasher, and the Angry Goblin deals 5 to Matt after rolling to see who it hits. Trevor goes big on his first main phase, tabbing all but 2 of his lands, which includes the Primal Wellspring. He uses all of this mana to cast Torment of the Hailfires, which is one of his new favorite spells, where X is 8. Vial Smasher triggers before the spell resolves, and she randomly assigns another 10 damage to Matt. Trevor explains how there is now 2 copies of the Torment where X is 8 on the stack, and he responds to the copy by reverberating the original copy. This means the guys have to resolve 24 instances of the spell, which outright kills Matt, Pat, and Sean, even if they sacrifice their entire board and their hands. Game review time. Matt had one heck of a start, and a turn to Azuri is nothing to scoff at. I think had he been able to attack with a Cold-Eyed Selkie at least once and draw a few cards off of it, he would have been in a much better board position, but at the same time, I think Pat recognized that it was a real threat and dealt with it accordingly. Matt has really reworked his Azuri deck, and it's become much more of an elf tribal deck, which I think functions a little bit better. It doesn't play as many broken cards, and there's a lot stronger of a synergy between the creatures in the deck. I smile every time that Sean is able to play his Ur-Dragon deck, and playing cards like Xenograft, Conspiracy, and Arcane Adaptation to make all of his creatures dragons seems like a lot of fun. Sean lately has been talking about adding a Kalia to his deck as another way to cheat out dragons, and I'm interested to see how that goes. It's really unfortunate that Pat wasn't able to get his deck going in this game, and I have to say that he did win the next one, although we didn't record it unfortunately. In terms of play though, I think he did a great job of threat assessment, dealing with Matt's creatures early on to prevent him from really pulling ahead. I think had he been able to get more of a land base early on, or at least some artifact ramp, he would have been a bigger threat and probably helped to deal with Trevor, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. Speaking of Trevor, my goodness does Vial Smasher love X spells. Being able to blast a person in the face for upwards of 10 damage in some cases is brutal. It's doubly offensive when you consider the fact that the damage isn't even part of the original spell, although it is in some cases, and oftentimes after taking the damage you have to resolve a completely different effect, often causing you to sacrifice creatures or permanents. I was initially skeptic about Jund's Spellslingers as a strong deck, but the amount of recursion, draw, ramp, and copying effects in his deck is incredible. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also find me on Twitter at MTGMudsta, at Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta, or on Twitch at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in part by support from my Patreons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below or in the About section. As always, thank you guys for watching, and please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more.